You wake before dawn to the sound of coughing. It comes from the far side of the narrow Genoese alley, a wet, tearing sound that does not stop. The air is thick with salt from the harbor, and the stench of fish guts rotting in the gutters. Ships arrived only days ago from the east, their sails ragged, their hulls swollen with grain, silk, and something no one can see. By nightfall, 3 men are dead. You are a dock worker, strong, young, used to danger. You have hauled cargo through storms and fought off thieves with a belaying pin. But this is different. Your neighbor's wife shows you the swelling under his arm before they carry him away. A dark, angry lump, hot to the touch. By morning, his skin is blotched black, as if burned from within. Within a year, between 1/3 and 1/2 of Europe will be dead. No invading army will breach the walls. No king will declare war. No prophet will foresee it in time. The greatest catastrophe of the medieval world will arrive not on horseback, but in the fur of rats, in the breath between 2 people, in the invisible bite of a flea, and it will break more than bodies. It will shatter faith. It will cripple empires. It will append the delicate hierarchy that binds peasant to lord, merchant to crown, bishop to god. The world you know, ordered, rigid, divinely sanctioned, will begin to crack. But here is the question no one around you can answer. How can a civilization that built cathedrals to touch heaven be brought to its knees by something so small? And what happens when death comes so fast that even prayer cannot keep up? As church bells begin to toll without ceasing, you feel something colder than fear. You feel the sense that the world itself, the medieval world of certainty, obedience, and unshakable belief, has been weighed and found fragile. Before the sickness came, the medieval world moved with confidence. From the ports of the Mediterranean to the frozen towns of Scandinavia, trade routes stitched continents together like veins carrying lifeblood. Venetian and Genoese merchants negotiated in distant bazaars. Caravans crossed the Silk Road under the shadow of the vast Mongol domains. Grain flowed from the Black Sea. Wool from England clothed weavers in Flanders. Silver, spices, slaves, relics, everything had its market. You live in a society that believes its place in the universe is fixed. God sits at the top. Beneath him, kings rule by divine right. Lords command land and loyalty. Knights wield steel in defense of order. Priests interpret eternity. And at the bottom, peasants till soil that is not theirs, bound by duty and birth. The structure is rigid, unquestioned. The great chain of being, they call it. Everything in its place. In the early 14th century, Europe is not weak. It is crowded. Population has surged after centuries of relative stability. Forests have been cleared. New fields plowed. Villages multiply. Cathedrals rise in stone and glass, proclaiming faith and wealth. Universities debate Aristotle and theology. Kings wage calculated wars for territory and honor. Yet beneath this confidence, strain already simmers. The climate has cooled. Harvests fail more often. The Great Famine of 1315 lingers in memory. Skeletal cattle, bread mixed with bark. Rumors of cannibalism whispered in the cold. Malnutrition weakens bodies. Peasants grumble under taxes to fund endless wars. Like the grinding conflict between England and France that will become the 100 Years' War. Still, trade intensifies. In the 1340s, far to the east, something stirs in the steppes of Central Asia. In territories tied together by Mongol governance, merchants and soldiers move swiftly across vast distances. With them travels a bacterium, Yersinia pestis, thriving in rodent populations. Fleas bite infected rats, then seek new hosts when the rats die. In 1346, at the port city of Kaffa, on the Crimean Peninsula, a Mongol army lays siege to a Genoese trading outpost. As disease ravages the besieging forces, chroniclers claim that corpses are hurled over the walls. Whether true or embellished, one fact remains. Plague enters the city. Genoese ships flee. They carry more than frightened sailors. They carry rats nesting in grain stores, fleas burrowed in fur, and in the holds, unseen passengers multiply. When the ships reach Messina in Sicily in 1347, witnesses describe sailors already dying, blackened and delirious. Authorities attempt to drive the ships away, but trade cannot simply be halted. Curiosity and greed overpower caution. The vessels disperse across the Mediterranean, to Genoa, Venice, Marseille. The disease moves with terrifying efficiency. A cough in a marketplace. A flea's bite in a crowded inn. A priest, leaning close to administer last rites. Within days, fever spikes. Pain lances through limbs. Lymph nodes swell into buboes the size of apples. Some victims vomit blood. Others drown in their own fluids, as pneumonic plague seizes their lungs. Death can come in 3 days. Panic begins in whispers. Then it erupts. In Florence, bodies pile in the streets. In Paris, the university debates whether the alignment of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars has poisoned the air. Physicians don bird-beaked masks stuffed with herbs, believing miasma, bad air, carries death. They bleed patients, burn incense, pray, but nothing stops it. Entire households vanish within a week. Fields go untilled, as farmers die before harvest. Monasteries lose half their brothers. Ships drift into harbors with no living crew aboard. The church urges repentance. Processions march through towns, citizens whipping their own backs in desperate displays of penance. If God has sent this, then perhaps God can be appeased. Yet even the most devout begin to notice something unsettling. Priests die too. Nobles die. Merchants die. Children die. There is no visible pattern of divine favor. No clear line between sinner and saint. The great chain trembles as plague surges northward into England, Germany, and beyond. The medieval world's greatest strength, its interconnectedness, becomes its fatal weakness. Roads that once carried prosperity now carry contagion. Ports that symbolized wealth now reek of mass graves. You stand in a world built on certainty, and certainty is dissolving. The question is no longer whether the plague will come. It is how much of the world will remain when it leaves. In London, carts rumble through narrow streets at night. Collecting bodies bring out your dead. The drivers call, though often there is no one left alive to answer. Authority falters. Kings retreat to countryside estates. Courts dissolve. In some regions, local officials abandon their posts. Law becomes uneven, fragile. When half a town is gone, who enforces order? Who collects taxes? Who punishes crime? Labor becomes scarce almost overnight. In England, entire manors lose their workforce. Crops rot in fields. Sheep wander untended. Survivors begin to realize something dangerous. They are suddenly valuable. A peasant who once had no leverage can now demand wages. In cities, artisans negotiate higher pay. Some leave their lords entirely, seeking better terms elsewhere. The rigid feudal bonds begin to fray. The ruling class reacts swiftly. In 1349, the English crown issues the Ordinance of Labourers, attempting to freeze wages at pre-plague levels and forbid workers from seeking better offers. Later, the Statute of Labourers reinforces penalties. It is an attempt to rewind time, to restore hierarchy by decree. But time does not rewind. Tension simmers for decades, culminating in open revolt. In 1381, long after the first wave of plague, English peasants rise in rebellion, marching on London, demanding an end to serfdom and oppressive taxes. Though the revolt is suppressed, the message is unmistakable. The social order is no longer unquestioned. Elsewhere, suspicion turns outward. As fear intensifies, communities search for scapegoats. In parts of Europe, Jewish populations are accused of poisoning wells. Pogroms erupt. Entire communities are massacred or expelled. The plague becomes not only a biological catastrophe, but a moral one, exposing how quickly fear corrodes coexistence. Meanwhile, the church faces a crisis deeper than any battlefield defeat. Clergy die in staggering numbers, often because they continue administering last rites to the infected. New priests are ordained hastily, sometimes poorly educated. Spiritual leadership weakens. If God is all-powerful and just, why does he permit this indiscriminate slaughter? Some cling tighter to faith, others quietly doubt. Mystics and fringe movements gain followers. Apocalyptic sermons spread. The idea that the end times are near feels less like metaphor and more like observation. Yet, amid collapse, opportunity emerges. In Italian city-states, like Florence and Venice, the immense loss of life concentrates wealth in fewer hands. Inheritance flows upward. Labor shortages spur technological innovation. Land once divided among many becomes consolidated. Surviving workers gain mobility. The plague, paradoxically, accelerates change. Urban elites invest in art, architecture, and learning. Humanism begins to stir. Though the Renaissance will bloom later, its seeds are watered in a soil enriched by tragedy. On battlefields, too, the balance shifts. With fewer peasants bound to land, armies evolve. Monetary economies strengthen as labor becomes commodified. Feudal obligations give way, slowly, to contractual relationships. The Black Death is not merely killing people, it is redistributing power. And for every lord attempting to tighten his grip, there is a survivor calculating new possibilities. For every institution insisting on stability, there is evidence of irreversible transformation. The medieval world does not collapse in a single dramatic instant. It fractures, quietly at first, then visibly. The unquestioned assumptions of centuries about hierarchy, divine order, permanence, are now contested by lived experience. When death has leveled king and commoner alike, the argument that birth determines destiny sounds weaker. The turning point is not a battle. It is a realization spreading through millions of minds. The system is not immutable, and once that realization takes hold, the old world can never fully return. Imagine a world where half the people you know suddenly disappear. Not over a lifetime, but in a matter of months. This isn't a scene from a blockbuster movie. This was the grim reality for people living in the mid-14th century. The Black Death, one of the most devastating pandemics in human history, swept across Europe, leaving a trail of loss and transformation in its wake. It arrived seemingly out of nowhere, carried by fleas on black rats aboard merchant ships. The bacterium, Yersinia pestis, was an invisible, terrifying enemy. Symptoms were horrific. Swollen lymph nodes, fever, chills, and for many, a swift, painful end. In just 5 years, from 1347 to 1351, it's estimated that the plague wiped out 30 to 60% of Europe's population. Entire villages were abandoned, becoming ghost towns overnight. The sheer scale of death was unimaginable. Mass graves were dug, but they quickly overflowed. The normal rituals of burial and mourning became impossible luxuries. The social fabric of medieval Europe was torn apart. The traditional feudal system, built on a vast, cheap labor force of serfs, began to crumble. With so few workers left, peasants suddenly found themselves in a position of power. They could demand higher wages, better conditions, and even freedom. Many abandoned their ancestral lands in search of better opportunities, leading to a massive social and economic shift. Landowners who once held all the power were forced to adapt or face ruin. This wasn't just an economic change. It was a revolution from the ground up. The psychological toll was just as profound. How do you make sense of a world where death is so random and widespread? Many saw it as divine punishment, a sign of God's wrath. This led to waves of religious fervor, with some people turning to extreme acts of penance, while others, seeing no future, threw themselves into a life of reckless abandon. The phrase memento mori, remember you must die, became a powerful artistic and cultural theme, with art depicting skeletons and the dance of death serving as a constant, morbid reminder of life's fragility. But humanity is resilient. The Black Death, for all its horror, also paved the way for a new world. The labor shortages spurred innovation. New technologies and more efficient farming methods were developed to compensate for the lack of manpower. The decline of the feudal system laid the groundwork for the rise of a new middle class of merchants and artisans. The unquestioned authority of the old institutions, including the church, was challenged, setting the stage for the intellectual and cultural rebirth of the Renaissance. The Black Death was a crucible that forged a new Europe. It was an era of unimaginable loss and suffering, but also of incredible change and adaptation. It reminds us that even in our darkest moments, the seeds of a new beginning can be found. It's a powerful lesson from history about the fragility of our world and the enduring strength of the human spirit to rebuild, innovate, and carry on. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into the past interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history. The Black Death did not end civilization. It ended an illusion. It revealed that interconnected prosperity can become interconnected vulnerability. The same trade networks that enriched Europe carried devastation. The same rigid hierarchies that promised stability proved brittle under pressure. Earlier, you stood in a Genoese alley, hearing the first coughs. You wondered how something so small could unmake something so vast. Now you know. Civilizations are not destroyed only by swords or sieges. They are undone when invisible forces exploit hidden weaknesses. Overcrowding, inequality, blind faith in permanence. The plague forced Europe to renegotiate power, labor, belief, and governance. It accelerated economic change. It weakened feudal bonds. It planted seeds that would eventually nourish the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the modern state. It also exposed darker impulses. Fear turning to violence. Communities turning against neighbors. Authority scrambling to preserve control at any cost. In our own interconnected world, where goods and people cross continents in hours, rather than months, the lesson strength and fragility are often the same network seen from different angles. The medieval world believed its order was divinely secured. The Black Death proved that no system is immune to shock. Yet it also showed something else. Adaptation is possible. Out of mass death came structural change, cultural rebirth, and new conceptions of human agency. When the bells finally stopped ringing, when grass grew over mass graves, survivors did not rebuild the same world. They built a different one. The question that lingers is not whether catastrophe will come. History suggests it will, in one form or another. The question is how we respond when certainty cracks. Whether we cling to brittle hierarchies, or whether, like those who endured the plague, we dare to reshape the world that remains.